Excellencies, all respectable resource persons, Board of Director and Managers of Simuracfon, all respectable participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Oh, it's already afternoon. So good afternoon. Because today is actually marked as Hari Gizi Nasional or National Nutrition Day in Indonesia. So actually, I conducted many events from the morning. So afternoon, but hopefully you feel it like morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Once again, welcome to Simuracfon's international webinar with topic Animal Source for Malnutrition Solution. I'm Sela Septiani, and I am very honored to be your master of ceremony of today's event. Honorable guests, as I mentioned before, today is National Nutrition Day or Hari Gizi Nasional. The big theme for this year's celebration is Healthy Adolescence Free from Anemia. Animal source food consumption is one of the important part of the solution to actualize this expectation. And for decades, Simuracfon has dedicated themselves for research, trainings, community development, as well as information dissemination on food and nutrition in Southeast Asia, including for this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the next agenda, I would like to remind some general rules of today's webinar. Participants are expected to enter the YouTube channel on time. The use of headphones is recommended. If you have any question, please write on the following question and answer form. The link you can see right now on your screen. At the end of the session, participants are expected to fill out the evaluation form as the proof of your attendance today. The certificate will only be given to the participants who completed this evaluation form. And the link to the evaluation form will be shared at the prior of the end session. The certificates will be available 3 weeks after this webinar. Last but not least, be sure to subscribe and like the Simuracfon YouTube channel, and also follow our activities on social media accounts at Simuracfon. So, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we start our today's main session, I am inviting you to pay respects to the Simeo song as well to gain more understanding of the organization by watching this following videos. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Simeo songs.
It's time to open our eyes to a bright and promising future. We'll rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn through science, health, and technology. We will share our expertise by promoting knowledge and policies. We can build a better world. Let us take a step for our visions alone, bringing future wish for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and dream. Here at Simeo, building the future is our legacy. We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities. By working hand in hand, we can accomplish accomplish all our dreams, for a better quality of life is now within our reach. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and grace. Hear us sing, building the future is our legacy. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and grace. Hear us sing, building the future is our legacy. Building the future is our legacy.
Thank you very much for paying attention. So yes, building the future is the legacy to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like also to invite the director of Semiorecfon, Mr. Muhtaruddin Mansur, MD, PhD, to give his opening remarks. So without taking any longer, to Mr. Muhtar, time is yours.
Thank you, Sheila. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon from Indonesia to all. Distinguished Dr. Barbara Hessler from the Royal Veterinary College, UK. It is an early morning in the UK. We were anxious to wait for you, Dr. Barbara. Yang saya hormati Bapak Insinyur Anang Nugroho Setiomulyono, Director for Food and Agriculture, National Planning Board, Bappenas. We know that child stunting being a chronic outcome of poor nutrition and environment that may be aggravated by COVID-19 pandemic. Many health facilities and programs are being distracted and affected by COVID-19 pandemic elimination. We really need prevention and control innovation to anticipate the further impact of the pandemic. Stunting is not simply a failure of linear growth. Stunted individuals suffer significant cognitive effects with lifelong impacts on economic and social well-being. The lack of dietary diversity, along with low consumption level of animal source food, are recognized as critical gaps for vulnerable children, especially in the low middle income countries. WHO in 2014 described animal source food as the best source of high quality nutrient dense food for 6 to 23 months of age children. To inspire a more interdisciplinary dialogue, Semiorecfon organized this international webinar on animal food source for malnutrition solution. Presenting resource person will enrich our understanding on food, especially about the animal source food. its central roles in our lives, and ultimately its effect on our well-being, especially during the most challenging time of COVID-19 pandemic. This webinar is conducted in conjunction with the 10th anniversary of SEMEREC-FON themed Forging Initiative on Food and Nutrition Education amidst challenging situation, celebrated throughout the year through various events such as competition, seminars, and workshops. This webinar aims to share evidence on the role of animal source food to solve undernutrition and strategy to improve the accessibility and affordability of animal source food in low-income countries while minimizing the negative environmental impact of ASF production on the environment. Again, thank the speaker, Dr. Barbara Hessler, the Royal Veterinary College UK, Insinyur Anang Nugroho Setyomulyono from Bappenas, Indonesia, and Dr. Umi Fahmida, our senior researcher of SEMEREC-FON, for your great sharing. I warmly welcome the 237 registrants from 11 countries, Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Pakistan, Philippines, Senegal, UK, USA, and wish you a great learning experience in this webinar session. We hope that the information sharing you gain from this webinar will further be shared to your colleges and students and stimulate ideas for its application in your daily life, in your daily work. I thank the committee of this webinar for their hard work and the Ministry of Education and Culture Government of Republic Indonesia and other parties for providing support for this webinar. I wish you all very successful session, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Success. Thank you. Back to you, Sheila.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Multarudin, for the excellent opening remarks. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we're entering the core session of our today's webinar. For that, I would like to introduce Grace Wong, MD, MSc, PhD from SEMEREC-FON as our moderator today. Dr. Grace Wong is Knowledge Management and Policy Support Unit Manager in SEMEREC-FON. She completed her medical doctor from Universitas Indonesia, then continued her postgraduate trainings in Netherlands and USA. Currently, she is an active researcher and advocates for public health and literacy issues in Indonesia. So, ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome Dr. Grace Wong. Dr. Grace, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sheila. So thank you very much. So I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and also maybe good evening for all the participants, because I heard a lot of people are registering from either northern or southern hemisphere. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in this important webinar. And maybe to start the session, we will have three distinguished speakers today. And we will discuss, those three experts will give us enlightenment on how animal source food can be one of the solutions for malnutrition. Yeah? So it is interesting that yesterday I just saw the Asia Pacific overview on food and security nutrition situation for 2020. And it is said that half of all children in Southeast Asia and about 1 in 5 children in Eastern Asia and Pacific are actually not growing well. So they are stunted, wasted, some even overweight, or even some combination of those three. So, and one of the major risk factors is actually related to the food access, especially protein access, yeah, which is actually widely available through animal source foods. And interestingly, also in the report, the consumption of animal source food for children is actually varies in the world. So in average, 40% of children consume animal source food. But in countries like India, the prevalence is only 18%. So only 80% of children is actually consumes animal source food. While in country like Mongolia, the figure is raising up until 94%. So 94% of children is actually consume animal source food in Mongolia. How about in Indonesia? So to brief us about the topic, we will have Dr. Umi Fahmida. She is actually our senior scientist and program coordinator of early childhood care nutrition educations. And she holds a PhD in nutrition and then also an MSc in community nutrition from Universitas Indonesia and a bachelor degree from IPB University in Bogor, also in Indonesia. And currently she acts as a country lead for Indonesia in UKRI GCRF Action Against Stunting Hub. So Bu Umi, in the next 15 minutes, can you please share your finding about animal source food consumption in Indonesia?
Yes. Thank you, Grace, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy National Nutrition Day. And I'm glad to share our work with the LP team from Simeo Rekfon and partners on our finding from the linear programming. Let me share the slide. Is that clear, Grace?
Yes, it is Bu now.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Also greetings for our colleagues.
Bu Umi, sorry,
yeah.
I think it's not yet pointed in the main screen. So I would like to ask the technical problem to the technical team. It's not really in the main screen, I think.
Oh, is it now? See that, Grace? How about now? So I hope now it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay now. I checked the YouTube.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone from Indonesia and other countries who join our webinars, and Selamat Hari Gizi Nasional, Happy National Nutrition Day. I'm glad to share our findings on how animal source foods can help meet the nutrient adequacy, which is the findings from our work with the LP teams and partners from linear programming analysis in stunting priority district in Indonesia. So briefly, because the background of the tool is the linear programming. So for those of you who may have heard but haven't known the details of the steps, the linear programming is basically a diet modeling. And currently we are lucky to have already like OptiFood, a software developed by WHO that basically make use of the inputs from the dietary data, including the food available, the portion, the pattern, and the cost, if you want, to develop an optimized diet. And at the same time, this approach can help us to identify what problem nutrients will be in our diet, given the food availability and the food pattern. And also, given that problem nutrients, what kind of nutrient-dense foods which are locally available, which can be promoted. So basically, the results of the linear programming analysis is an optimized food-based recommendations which can specifically promote nutrient-dense foods, which can help improve the problem nutrients in the diet of the people. So briefly, the step is making use of the dietary data, where we will have usually from the survey, national survey, the list of the food consumed, the portion, and we also need to have it into the food frequency as a frequency per week, which we call as a food pattern. If it is breastfed children, also the breastfeeding status, and of course, along with its name, linear or goal programming. Besides those constraints, we also need the information about the goal, which are the energy requirement and also the recommended nutrient intake, or in Indonesia is angka kecukupan gizi. The data can be originating from a survey. In study, we can have a 7 day per person. That would be ideal, but basically you can also do it with a single 24-hour recall data from a national survey. And in addition, if you want to check the cost, you may have the market survey data as a cost per 100 gram edible portion. And basically the approach LP, linear programming in OptiFood, help us to identify the problem nutrient. As you can see here in module 2, any nutrients which cannot meet 100% RNI, when we optimize the diet, will be called the problem nutrients. For example, here, calcium, iron, and zinc are the problem nutrients. And also the tool will help to identify what type of problem nutrients, basically because some problem nutrients, when you do the maximization or best case scenarios, can still remain below 100% RNI. That's what we call absolute problem nutrients. The challenge will be going toward the nutrition sensitive approach, agriculture, livestock, because we need to expand the food basket. But if it is a partial problem nutrient, when we maximize becomes more than 100%, basically it is more about promoting the intake because the foods are already in the food basket of the community. And at the same time, you can also see the dietary inadequacy from this tool, which means even the nutrients which are not problem nutrients, if we do not strengthen in our message, they may go to below the estimated average requirement or the adequacy level. One of the feature which is very helpful in the LP OptiFood is basically the feature to help us identify the nutrient-dense foods. As you can see here, if zinc is the problem nutrient, you can see the food sources which contribute to 5% or more of the intake, and this can be specifically promoted in our local specific food-based recommendation. For example, here it points out to fish as one of the nutrient-dense food for zinc. So in summary, the linear programming using OptiFood can give us two information, one on the problem side about the problem nutrient, the type of problem nutrients and dietary inadequacy, while on the solution side, we can have information on what nutrient-dense food, and in particular, we can also see if animal source foods are identified, what types are specifically available in the area. So I would like to share here the finding from our LP analysis from the first initial 10 stunting priority district in the under 2-year-old children. The map shows like the color of red, which are the districts which have 3 or more problem nutrients, yellow if 1 or 2, and green if no problem nutrients. And basically you can see here the younger children tend to have more reds, more problem nutrients. But also within the same age group, there are variation of the number of problem nutrients, even across these 10 initial stunting priority districts. And basically, it points out to iron, zinc, and folate as the typical problem nutrients among these under 2-year-old children. We also did in the first 10 stunting priority district for the pregnant mothers, and you also see here, especially iron and folate are problem nutrients which are very typical. More recently, with the support of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, we also conducted more LP analysis for more stunting priority districts in Indonesia, 37 districts in 33 out of 34 provinces in Indonesia, with the support of our academic partners and making use of the dietary data available from the National Food Consumption Survey contributed by the Ministry of Health. And the results of this analysis shows that the problem nutrients also varied. Again, these are the figure for the under 5-year-old children, where again we see more problem nutrients in the younger children, in infants, but also varied across the across areas within the same age group. You can see here even some green, which shows that the existing food basket actually is adequate if utilized optimally to ensure dietary adequacy. From these 37 districts, the most typical problem nutrients which we identified are iron, as you can see here, by the age group. In the youngest age group, iron, folate. In the later age group, folate, zinc comes, and also calcium. And as you can see, these are the foods in which animal source foods are a good source. On the right side, the table shows you the types of the animal source foods that we identified and contributed to more than 5% total nutrient intakes. As you can see, for example, here fish are very potential because it can contribute to 9 to even 14 nutrients for the ensuring nutrient adequacy. We also found like poultry, including chicken liver, eggs, and a little bit also on the red meat. So these findings actually is consistent with studies showing that young children who eat animal source food grow less stunted. This study from Nepal, Uganda, and Bangladesh. And the study also found that the longer the intake, the stronger is the association, because association is more found more significant when it is related to the past intake rather than the current intake. It is highlighting the importance of long-term good adequate intake. And the findings from the 37 districts also identified unique, so to say, local values of the local recipes, because actually there are local recipes from the westernmost to the easternmost Indonesia. We call it Sabang sampai Merauke, as you can see here. And in each of those composites, traditional recipes, you can see fish, for example, seafoods, chicken liver are very much key, and these are the nutrient-dense foods which can meet the problem nutrients as identified in the LP analysis. And we are also happy with the support of our partners, Poltekkes, universities, and also our LP team and facilitators. We already have developed posters and leaflets which are available. So the 37 district plus the previously 10 plus 3 of RECFON's ECCNE locus. So we have the information available which you can access here for 4 age groups of under 5-year-old children. So in summary, our findings found that iron, zinc, calcium, and folate are typical problem nutrients among the under 5 children and pregnant mothers in these stunting priority districts, and the animal source foods are identified as the nutrient-dense foods which are important to meet the nutrient adequacy of these problem nutrients. And therefore, the local specific food-based recommendations developed using this approach, which highlight the specific animal source foods to be improved for their consumptions, is important so that the problem nutrients can be, the intakes of these problem nutrients can be improved, and it can help to ensure adequate growth of our children. So we thank our partners, the academic partners, and also the support from Ministry of Health, again, and Ministry of Education and Culture for all this work so far. And thank you very much for joining, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Umi, for your excellent presentation as always. And it is nice to see that actually we don't really have to judge whether we have to eat animal food source or whether we have to eat more vegetables. It's a matter of what kind of nutrients is lacking in that area, and what kind of a food that actually can fill in the gap, right, Bumi? And apparently the gaps that is need to be filled is actually can be filled in by animal source food, especially for children, to prevent them from malnutrition, especially stunting. So, but then I think we already know recently there are a lot of new lifestyle movement that were introduced also by the celebrities. Yeah, how we they were saying that eating more animal source food is actually not good for the environment. It's not really environmentally friendly, right? So, is it true? So, to discuss that, I will invite Dr. Hassler, Dr. Barbara Hassler. She's a senior lecturer in the Royal Veterinary College in UK. And she's also a member of GCRF Action Against Stunting Hub, where she acts as one of the leaders of the food systems team. So really very much related to answer our questions, right? And she's also a veterinary research with expertise in livestock and fish food systems, economics, which is applied to animal health and One Health. She originally graduated from Bern University, but now I think she is based in UK. So very good morning, Dr. Hassler. So in the next 15 minutes, I hope we can learn more. Is it true that having animal source food is actually endangering the environment? So the time is yours, Dr. Hassler.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope you can see that in the right way.
Yes, it is clear.
Okay, it's fine. Wonderful. Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning, afternoon, evening, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here today and talk about food systems approaches to deliver the right animal source foods to people. In my talk, I'm going to reflect briefly about the importance of animal source foods and then go into sustainability considerations. I will also say a few words about foodborne disease, and then think about how we can use food systems approaches to deliver these right animal source foods to people. What I'm going to talk about is not only my own work, but it is from many years of interactions and discussions with a lot of different colleagues from all the projects that you can see listed here at the bottom. And yesterday I started listing them all, but the list got so long that it wasn't readable anymore, because there's so many people who are working in that space in these different interdisciplinary projects with me. So I would like to thank them all for the great work over the years, and this presentation is yours as well. So as we have already heard, that animal source foods, they can make an important contribution to nutrition, in particular where nutrients are lacking, where we see undernutrition. And my colleagues Silvia Alonso, Paulo Dominguez-Salas, and Delia Randolph, they did a review article to look at the role of livestock products for nutrition in the first 1,000 days of life. And as we have heard, animal source foods, they provide a lot of important micronutrients that can boost nutrient-poor diets as part of a normal diet for these populations. However, the scientific evidence is still quite limited. It is growing now, but there are quite few studies that have found positive associations with nutritional outcomes, including a positive impact on linear growth. So it has been shown for in a few studies now, and I think overall the evidence is increasing. Also, what these studies found is that there is no potential adverse impact of consuming moderate amounts of livestock products during this period. But what is a general recommendation from this study that I just mentioned is that the studies that are done on the topic should have a look at their designs to make sure that the designs are a bit stronger and that the evidence that is produced also is then reliable. But if you are, and I think Dr. Grace mentioned it very, very nicely before, we are looking at the nutrients that are lacking in a diet, and then sometimes animal source foods are exactly the right product to deliver these animal source foods. So we could then just say, let's have a look at that, and then if we need animal source foods, then we produce them and we distribute them, and all should be well. But it's not that simple anymore because of sustainability considerations and really serious concerns about the future of our planet. Food systems account for about 27% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And what you can see here on this slide on the left is the food contribution and the non-food contribution. If you have a closer look at the food contribution, then we can see that the supply chain with the retail, the packaging, the transport, and the food processing contribute about 18% of these 27%. And then the livestock and fisheries 31%. And then we also need to have a look at crop production, which includes crops for animal feed and for human food. And then also the land use, which again has a component for human food and land use for livestock. So overall, you already see that the livestock proportion within these greenhouse gas emissions is quite substantial. Then another concern is that agriculture accounts for the vast majority of global freshwater withdrawals and consumption. And that in this graph, you see in green the share of the agricultural production, and in yellow the industrial production, and in blue the domestic water supply. In the left-hand donut, we have the freshwater withdrawals, and on the right hand, the freshwater consumption. So about 75% of freshwater resources are now devoted to crop or livestock production. So quite a substantial amount of resource that is being used here. Then apart from that, there are several other concerns related to animal source food systems. We are concerned about biodiversity loss, disease emergence in these systems, such as avian influenza, for example. There are a lot of people looking into antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial use and how antimicrobial resistance could be managed better in these systems. There are concerns about plastic pollution and also other hazards. On top of that, there's a host of ethical concerns which relates to, for example, child labor and workers' rights. When we think about animals, we are increasingly concerned as a global society about the welfare of these animals. There are issues around intergenerational legacy and also food waste. There are estimates on food waste that say that about a third of our global food available is wasted. So there's a lot to think about, and because of all these concerns in relation to animal source foods, there are more and more calls that say that we should consume fewer animal source foods. And one of the examples of such a group that is making this claim is the Eat Lancet Commission, which has defined a planetary health plate, which should consist by volume of approximately half a plate of vegetables and fruits. The other half, displayed by contribution back to calories, should consist of primarily whole grains, plant protein sources, unsaturated plant oils, and optionally, a modest amount of animal source protein. So that's one example, but there are several studies out there that say if we continue with our animal source food consumption, then we cannot really have sustainability and good planetary health. But there are also counter-arguments or criticisms of these messages. And one example is given here, which is a study by Adegos and colleagues that was published in 2020, where the authors say that these general messages, that they are not very helpful because we need to have more nuance and we need to have a look at which populations would benefit from a higher intake of animal source foods. So the authors say that increasing access to and consumption of moderate amounts of animal source food should simultaneously be a global priority for people in areas where undernutrition remains a persistent problem, particularly for infants and women of childbearing age. The authors also claim that there is too much focus on the negative impact of livestock production, too much focus on high-income countries and overconsumption, and that the positive effects on vulnerable populations of livestock consumption is neglected. So there are many discussions going on like that, with one group of people saying we need to get rid of animal source foods, so we need to reduce them, and other people who say no, they have an important place in society. And just to say that there are other positive effects of animal source foods. They can also contribute to animal development. They provide employment, income, and livelihoods for a large number of people. They can also use land that is not suitable for crop production. And it can have a positive effect on biodiversity, for example, in external production, and also on gender equality in particular, where there are situations where for example, women do not have the land to ride and they can benefit from livestock. Livestock manure can also be used as an organic fertilizer and fuel, and it can help us to reduce waste through using byproducts that are coming from other industries. Also, in many cultures, they are a very important store of wealth, social security, and prestige. So we can see that it's a complex picture of having these negative effects and the positive effects, and sometimes mixed effects depending on the situation. And we are facing the dilemma of how to achieve a better balance. So what we see here in this chart at the bottom is the number of cattle going up from 1961 to 2014 for the world, a very substantial increase in the biomass of cattle. If you have a look at the right-hand chart at the bottom, which shows the livestock counts, then we see that chickens, in comparison to cattle, has shown an incredibly steep increase over the same time periods. So overall, we are rapidly shifting the global mammal biomass towards livestock, and we are reducing the wildlife biomass. So against this, I think it's fair to say that we need to think about which populations should and can reduce their animal source food intake, and which populations would benefit from an increase in consumption. Now, for all populations, it is quite important that we think about foodborne disease risks, because foodborne disease has an important impact on health and economic activity and income, and it affects pretty much everybody who consumes food. So all of us, independent of whether we should consume more or less animal source foods. For a long time, we didn't have good estimates of what the foodborne disease burden is around the globe, and that has been tackled with the Foodborne Disease Burden Epidemiology Reference Group that published estimates of the global burden of disease with the foodborne disease burden included. And as part of this studies, it was found that the burden due to foodborne disease is very, very high, similar to, for example, that of malaria. So for Indonesia, which was put in a cluster which was called Southeast Asia Region B, and Indonesia has 75% of the population of this region. They found that 75% of foodborne disease risk stemmed from 8 hazards, which are listed here, including Salmonella typhi and paratyphi, then the enteropathogenic E. coli, non-typhoid Salmonella enterica, lead, norovirus, arsenic, and Salmonella enterotoxigenic E. coli. So these are hazards that should be considered when thinking about foodborne disease in that context. And then on the right-hand side, you see a chart from Lee et al. That looked at the animal source food, the the proportion of foodborne disease that could be attributed to animal source foods. And you can see in the light purple chart on the right, which is the Southeast Asia region B, that it is about 20% for that region, which includes in Indonesia. These foodborne disease risks, they may occur at any part of the food system, starting from primary production, where we may see disease in emergence or bringing of hazards into the system through, for example, the use of inputs. During transport, we can have a transmission of pathogens to other animals. At the harvesting, storage, retail and consumption stages, we may want to think about food hygiene and cross-contamination, which could lead to a multiplication of, for example, bacterial hazards. And then also at the stages of recycling and waste disposals, we can create direct and indirect risks in terms of foodborne disease. For example, when inappropriate disposal of waste then leads to a new foodborne disease, a disease outbreak, and contamination of the environment. So having this in mind, the sustainability considerations and also these food safety concerns. So how can we bring nutritious, high quality and safe animal source foods to the people who need them the most? In other words, can the food system deliver the right foods? When we think about food systems, then we are looking at a very complex system with many different interactions and dynamics. So we have in the middle of this chart on the right, which was produced by colleagues at the City University, the Centre for Food Policy in London. In the middle, they put the food chain, and then around it, several circles that feed directly or are linked to this food chain. So we are also looking at health, environment, society, economy, and politics. Now, traditional food-based interventions for child nutrition, they quite often focus on the household farm or individual level interventions. But we know that even in remote areas of low and middle income countries, food markets quite often supply most of food needs of households. But we haven't had so much work done yet, or not so many solutions where we found the right way to deliver these accessible, affordable, nutritious, sustainable, and safe foods through the food system. Some of this may be due because of the challenges that we are seeing here. So we have the need for all these qualities of food, safe, nutritious, available, affordable, and so on, which cuts across the whole of the human population, all of society. But the consumer choices, the tastes and preferences are very diverse. And then also certain mechanisms that are commonly used, such as premium prices on food values, they often exclude poor consumers and favor affluent population groups. Another challenge that we see is that the system is very dynamic. We see it's changing consumption practices in parallel with changes in retail, restaurants, street vendor chains, and practices. And also we have sometimes standards and regulatory approaches that are punitive or non-acceptable to people in the food system, which can lead to compliance issues. But I would say probably the biggest challenge we are dealing with is that we have this complex adaptive system with many interactive drivers and feedback loops, many interlinked actors and activities, socioeconomic and environmental drivers. And on top of that, the economic incentives and disincentives that we see are as diverse as the system. So with that challenge, our traditional silo approaches, they do not really serve the purpose because we are struggling with our historical approaches to deal with complexities and therefore need to have a look at other approaches. So I would like to give you an example of what we started looking at when we started trying to link economic and food safety considerations in food value chains. So we thought we would need to look at the wider food system to set food value chains to better understand where food safety risks may occur and to help characterize these food safety risks and then also think about interventions. So we used a value chain mapping, which helped us with the profiling of these chains. It helped us to understand the movements of foods, people, and payments and information in the system. It also gave us information about whether something was stable or unstable over time, whether the system was changing or largely stable as a whole. And then we looked at governance to understand the market structure, the power in the system, whether there were formal and informal rules, whether these rules were followed, what the incentives and disincentives were, and then also the consumer needs and preferences. We also had an element of assessment of benefits, where we looked at the distribution of such benefits, the profits and the losses in the systems, and then also non-economic benefits, which included gender, social equality, and nutrition aspects. All this information helped us to put together information on what may be critical nodes in the system, which could be hotspots for introduction or emergence, the connectedness, which could give us information on transmission in the chain, and also risky practices, which would help us to think about contamination and poor hygiene. This then gave us a frame to think about sampling of foods at defined levels in that system to then generate the food safety information that we needed. And at the bottom here, you can see a range of publications that were done as part of some projects. We now have, I think, publications for of this type of approach for most livestock species, in particular for Nairobi, and that work was very heavily led and influenced by my colleague Pablo Aragon and also Jonathan Rushton and Eric Fevre. So if you're interested in these type of studies, there are quite a few examples now that you could look at. Then we felt that it wasn't enough to think about food safety in value chains only, and that we needed to bring in the nutrition aspects. And there are a couple of projects listed here, which the most important one, which was the core, where we trialed this, was the epidemiology, ecology, and socioeconomics of disease emergence in Nairobi project, led by Eric Fevre. And then we had a complementary project, which was led by Elaine Ferguson, who some of you may know as well, with the input of Paula Dominguez-Salas. And we also had similar efforts in a project called Rapid Integrated Assessment for Food Safety and Nutrition, which was led by Delia Randolph. So we then thought, okay, how can we bring in the nutrition? And it's quite nice that Umi in her previous presentation explained OptiFood modeling so lovely. So we used exactly this approach. First, we looked at consumer preferences, did a questionnaire-based survey, anthropometrics, 24-hour recall, and also thought about the food environment to see what people ate, what their taste and preferences were, and the food choices that they made. We then used OptiFood modeling to think about which foods can help fill existing nutrient gaps and which of these local foods could make a difference. And then we wanted to link that to the value chain work that I described in my previous slide, with the survey, the focus group discussions, key informant interviews, and mapping that we did, and then also bring in the biological sampling in these chains to see whether the foods that can actually make a nutritional difference, whether they would have any risks in terms of food safety, and how these food safety hazards or risks could then be tackled. So that was our first time we tried to do that. And we found that it is very, very difficult to make the link between the consumer end and the chain. So to be then quite robust in the findings on which chains can actually deliver the right foods in a safe and sustainable way. So we are now continuing this work in the UKRI GCRF Action Against Stunting Hub in the food system theme, which I share with many colleagues working in the area. And we are tackling the research questions that you see here. And we are starting with the food environment to know which households acquire food in the 3 country sites that we have. And then we want to know which foods can make the nutritional difference, as I explained before, and which Umi also showed very beautifully. But then we want to take it a step further and think about, of these foods, which food systems or chains have the most potential to deliver that. So which foods are generally of interest to people, which have a political priority, which may be supported by producers and so on. So we think about the potential of certain food chains. And then we wanted to look at the food safety and hygiene issues in these chains. And we then want to think about the market dynamics and how these foods that do have the potential to make a difference and could be safe, how can these find their ways to people? And then we also have a component in there to look at modeling market scenarios using system dynamics, and I'm going to say more about that in a second. But what about the environment? Is that something that we have forgotten? So far, I haven't said much about adding the environment, but given what I said before about sustainability, I think it would be very important to also consider environmental values and think about what are the risks and the opportunities in terms of environmental values. How could the system be more, the food system, these livestock food systems that we are looking at, be made more efficient, be made less wasteful? How can we use novel technologies, ways of production, storage, and distribution, and stay ideally within the carrying capacity of the country and within red lines? And the red line, for example, could be to not increase the land that we are using for agriculture. Also, how can we promote environmental stewardship in these systems? And then also there is a formal approach where we can have environmental valuation techniques combined with socio-economic value chain tools, so a very formal merging of different aspects or different value aspects in value chain analysis. And if you want to take everything a step further, and that's my last slide, second last slide, we can think about food systems approaches where we try to think about the whole food system that we are looking at, or a subsystem. And that is something that we have started doing in a project focusing on livestock food systems in South Africa as part of the Sustainable and Healthy Food System Project. Here we want to look at the system, all the different dynamics in the system, the linkages between different aspects and people in this system, and how it can help us to make sure that we have multiple benefits that are being generated without having additional unintended or negative consequences. And as you can see in this slide, it can get quite complex quite fast. And that is probably one of the main reasons why we haven't made so much progress. It takes time to study these systems in detail, and it also needs an awful lot of different expertise from different people, disciplinary expertise, for example, to cover the nutrition, the environment, the food safety, the governance policy, and so on. But hopefully, going forward, we can have integrated approaches that link these multiple elements of a food system, and we can get there step by step. We can start with the identification of foods that can make a nutritional difference, if that is our main question, and then think about how we can use systems thinking and systems approaches to generate these multiple values and reduce unintended consequences. But to do that, I think we need to address complexity and somehow embrace it and not shy away from it. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Hassler, for your presentations. I think now I see that the issue is very complex. It's not like to solve malnutrition, we have one solution for all, but also to deliver, to make animal sources as one of the solutions is also something that needs the integrated system with a multidisciplinary approach. So there's a lot of homeworks there, and I hope maybe after this, your project, the UK Hub project, can actually answering some of the questions. I bet this we need a long process to answer all the questions within the system, how we can have the best system that can, and one thing is helping the issue of malnutrition, and the other thing is also how to make the system, the solution more sustainable. I think, thank you so much. And we hope you will get a lot of questions from the audience. So the audience, if you want to post any question to Dr. Hassler, you can just click the link that was in the running text. And you can post your question either in Indonesian or in English or in Dutch if you want to. And then I will read the question to the speaker. Okay. So last but not least, we have our third speaker, which is Senor Anang Nugroho. Pak Anang, are you there?
All right.
Okay,
Great.
Pak
How are
Anang.
you?
Thank. Yeah,
Hello.
good, Pak Anang. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
As well, yeah.
yeah. So let me introduce you first, Pak Anang. Pak Anang is the Director for Food and Agriculture from our Ministry of National Development and Planning. This is interesting because Pak Anang is actually, he graduated from IPB University Indonesia, but he has a master in engineering management, in energy management and environmental program, ya Pak, ya, from George Washington University, and also resource economics from Georgetown University, also in US. And he has been working in the public service for 30 years. Wow. Basically my age. Oh no, I'm joking. So, and since February 2018, besides becoming the Director of Food and Agriculture with the Ministry of National Development Planning, he also served as National Chair for SDG 2 and hunger. Okay, Pak Ana. So can you tell us more maybe about the national strategy of Indonesia, how we can improve the availability and consumption of animal source food for the next 15 minutes, Pak?
All right, thank you very much, Grace. Thank you very much, moderator, and happy to all of you. Hoping all is well. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure whether it's still a good morning as well. Well, my presentation is dedicated to the giving a share and experience from Indonesia, and also based on our approach and internal simulation within the ministry. And the title of this presentation is pretty much on the how we are developing enabling environment, or the national strategies to improve the availability, and also we are of course maintaining the access and as well as the consumption for the animal source food in Indonesia. I'm starting with the problems and challenges that at this moment currently Indonesia faced with the, we call it as a triple burden malnutrition. The first one is, we call it as undernutrition. I think is everyone acknowledge the situation. Whereas the undernutrition is considered on the stunting in children. We've been already evaluating starting from 2010, 2013, and eventually we could reduce even still relatively slow, and how of course still have a prevalence on the condition of 2018 that now we are having a 30.8% of our children is condition of the stunting. I think the first presenter giving us the overview of the condition and situation with the very nice geospatial information. And also in addition of having the stunting condition in our children, we are also experiencing for the wasting in children. So on this situation, fortunately, we could reduce a bit more acceleration for that from 13.6 in 2010 going to be 2018 going 10.2%. Our children is still in the condition of wasting situation. The other malnutrition problems we are facing at this moment is overweight in children, but obesity in adults. So I think those two condition, I think, is still giving us the reflection of what is the best available food stock that could be provided to reduce this. And the other burden for the malnutrition in this our problem is micronutrient deficiency is increased. I think from the first presenter, we learned that the iron and also zinc are still inadequate, especially for our pregnant women, and cause of the anemia for the pregnant woman that at this moment still in a very high situation. If we are looking back on the situation of the index of the food security index on the basis of the several indicators, there are four indicators that come into this measurement. We've been already having a quite good for the affordability of the food and also availability. I think those two are indicators are quite significant important, then making us that we've been already having a great foundation for the providing for the food for our people. However, while at the same time, we are facing also a great challenge of how we are providing a good situation of the resilience in matters of our natural resource management, and also we are struggling to maintain the quality and safety of our food. I think those two, especially quality and safety for our food system in Indonesia for the future still need to be strengthened. So on the basis of this, we are in this 5 years development plan. We are trying to reach until the 2024, we could reach more higher index going from the 64, while at this moment, between of 62 and 64 going to be 69, and the government is quite significant giving attention for these problems, mainly due to poor dietary diversity, poor protein quality. Of course, one of them is a lack of the animal protein, and also, if I mentioned previously, is still having a problem of deficiency on the micronutrient. We are in Bappenas developing these food sectors on the basis of the strategy how to improve the quality of our people consumption on the basis of what we call it as a desirable dietary pattern, which is this core indicating that the diversification of our food that at this moment still need to be improved. You can see that from consumption on 2019, while we are starting for the next 5 years development plan, we are still having a gap of the lack of or still lower level of our vegetable, fruits, and animal food. So with the intervention from our regulatory frameworks, from the budgetary allocation, we would like to stimulate the situation and to have and to achieve, we call it as more fruits and vegetable provided, while in the same times we are make a balance with other type of food. You can see that the on the right side, the DDP or desirable dietary pattern with the color of green, we are hoping that we could increasing this by stimulating whether it's budgetary allocation and also regulatory framework and other enabling environment instruments. Interestingly, if we could see this data, this coming out from the works from the joint works from OECD and FAO on the 2020, you can see that the Indonesia on the, if we could on the left side on the 4 lines, it was indicated that the our animal sources foods coming out from, mostly coming out from poultry meat. We could understand for this situation that the easily self-sufficient for this poultry meat is considered to be more easier, while we are taking a production from beef and other meats. If we compare all of the countries that measure by OECD and FAO, it was also interestingly that surrounding us, if we compare with the Malaysia, for example, that they are quite very high in the poultry meat. So I think, so we think in Bappenas, in order to make cost efficiency and balancing with the availability of the animal sources, we are still keeping on this track to increase and improve the condition of the business of the poultry meat for the next coming 5 years. I think those trends will be continued further for the next coming years. And another data based on the consumption expenditure, it was also interesting that from 2013 going 2020 at this moment, since that the prepared food is very high compared with other fresh food. So on this, it's also interesting for us that the consumption for cigarette and tobacco is still stable. I think this not what I'm calling is not a balanced situation. That of course we need to have what we call it as a transformation for our food systems to make a balance, of course, between the raw food and also prepared food. And while in the same time, as government, we are encouraging the danger of and the extreme impact of having a cigarette as the consumption. So you can see this, we can further study on this, and you can see more on my following presentations, where is the policy intervention that we are hoping could also make this much better situation. On the protein intake in Indonesia, we are now having 2 sources from the plant and animal. You can see that this protein intake in Indonesia, we are still having this intake from the plant protein. And if we compare with the situation with another picture, to make a comparison between urban and rural, we can see that for the rural people, they are still having a deficiency in animal source of protein. So I think this is also giving us the picture how we are making more daily deliverables for the protein for our rural community. On the basis of the protein consumption from animal source foods, then we could conclude that this also coming out from our geographic condition, since Indonesia is the archipelagic countries with the more ocean or seawater surrounding us. You can see that the fish consumption is giving more larger contribution on the composition between fish and other animal protein. I think on this basis, I think the role of fish and fisheries product to contribute on the total animal protein to feed to give a food for our people, that's also quite making us more strategic. That's why on the basis of this government perspective, government also giving more attention how to develop more ocean and fisheries management in the more sustainable and more giving advantage for the people. Since the sources of the protein are the animal food, then we will be evaluating for the protein availability in Indonesia. You can see that the protein availability in Indonesia is still on the basis of the on the format from our cereals. While also we are having the fish is considerable higher than other source of protein. I would like to make some analysis that give you in the presentation for the comparison between Indonesia and other countries on the basis of the cost of adequate nutrient and healthy diet. Even the situation is quite good for the affordability previously on my presentation. However, for the cost of making the energy sufficient, nutrient adequate, and healthy diet is still high compared with other several countries. So on this matter, the choice will be put it in the price going to be one of the consideration to for the people to take a food either from the animal sources or the other sources as well. On part of the participation rate of the livestock consumption, you can see that the most, again, I can share with you that the poultry meat or consist of the chicken and also an egg is giving average rate for the consume is much higher than other part of the sources. And the good situation for us in Indonesia that the volatility of the food price is not quite very dynamics within the animal protein compared with other source of food. Even we are experiencing within the pandemic period. Fortunately, we could keeping this price dynamic in the more stable compared with other other type of food. How the healthy diets and child stunting situation among countries in Asia Pacific compare with the unaffordability of the healthy diet. You can see that we are still in the cluster of the mostly 60 or 70% is still having difficulties to afford for healthy diets. I'll be trying to accelerate, to express, to progress this by by showing you that there are 5 programs within the government. We are placing first on the food consumption that supported with one of them is biofortification, and also sustainability of the food supply, and of course increasing productivity for the agriculture laborers, and of course we are promoting for the agriculture digitalization, and while at the same times we are also keeping up and on the permanent food systems and food governance. You can also, I can give you the share for the indicator that on our 5 years development plan, you can see that the desirable dietary pattern is on the top of the objective of our agro-food policy. I can share with you that Bappenas using this as a part of our development planning to develop the food activities within, we call it as a national food system, consists of the food production, local food industrialization, stability of the food access, and developing the farmer corporation, and of course we are still keeping the instrument for the food aid for vulnerable household. And I think this is also continuing from the government intervention, starting we are keeping our biodiversity through as the input for the food supply, and going into a more diversified and balanced and safe diet for the people. I'm letting you to see the more pages that close with our intervention, whether we could also make a comparison on the budget allocation among the intervention. And the last I would like to share with you as again, transformation of protein consumption for malnutrition solution is how we are changing, or the animal protein become a game changer for the better consumption and better quality for our food program. Thank you very much. Back to you, Grace.
Okay, thank you so much, Fana. For so it is relieving for me that we do already have a system, in fact, that can ensure the sustainability of animal source food distributions and also supply in our country. The system is not as complex as Dr. Hessler presented, but I think it's really a comprehensive one. So thank you for all the speakers. And now it is a good time for discussions in this afternoon. So I think some of the interesting questions have come up from the audience. Yeah. But before that, I would like to ask the first question from me to Bu Umi. So, because I think she mentioned in the beginning about the local available food. So, Bu Umi, can you maybe elaborate more about that? What do you mean by local recipe, local available food? Is it like old recipe that we have from our great-grandmothers and we already forgot about it? Or what is it exactly, locally available food?
Okay, thank you, Grace. Yeah, I think when we mention about the term locally available foods or local recipes, it is exactly what is captured in the consumption survey. So it doesn't have to be something that very unique about the area, which is not available in the other area. So basically all foods which are locally available and for OptiFood, which are locally consumed, are locally available foods. And that is important because sometimes in our effort to promote local nutrient-dense food, sometimes there is some understanding that local specifics should be very unique. Actually, it is all foods which are available locally. It can be a single just food produce, or maybe also local recipes.
Okay.
I hope that answers.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily have to be indigenous food, Rabu. It actually can be also modern food as long as it's fulfill actually the nutrients needs of that region. Okay, that's that. I think that's a very clear definition that we have to settle, I think, before our discussions. So I think there's already a lot of questions from the three speakers. Can maybe the committee present the questions on screen? So I have this first question for Dr. Hasler. The question is from Almira Sitasari from Indonesia. She's asking about the issue of microplastics. They were found in animal source food, which is raising. Yeah, we see a lot of pictures where actually inside meats or fish there are a lot of microplastic, and we actually consume microplastics. Which can cause several long-term damage for our health. So how is the best way to protect our population, our society for this danger of microplastics, Dr. Hasler?
Thank you very much for a very, very interesting question and super relevant, because that really is a major concern nowadays, that we find these microplastics absolutely everywhere, and we are consuming them. It is not an area of expertise of mine, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. But what I think we need to do, we really need to, as a global society, need to find ways to reduce plastic use where we can, and then also have a sensible recycling systems, have awareness in society so that plastics are put into recycling where possible, and also that we find new technologies to find something that works as well as plastic, but it does not have the same consequences as plastic, in that it doesn't biodegrade, or not easily. So I would say this is really a global concern, given that these microplastics are found absolutely everywhere, and we need to find solutions that span all countries.
Yeah, so I hope that answered the question from Almira. Yeah, so maybe in the future we hope we can see more solutions that can replace plastics. Yeah. Okay, the next question, please. Oh, the next question is from Misa Yudisti for Bu Umi and Pak Anang, yeah, directly. So this is a nice, interesting question from the food industry. So what can the food industry do to contribute in malnutrition solution using animal source? Yeah. So what are the best format to deliver the right nutrition for this? Maybe Pak Anang first.
All right, thank you, Grace. Well, as you can see from my presentation, that the food industry, I think, is having a very important role to prevent or to avoid malnutrition, as we face as a big challenge. One thing that maybe we can have in the program is how to make promotion from their products, that their products is also giving the information, the contents, and also the composition of the micronutrients needed, or also need to have whether is the sources from the this animal is done through the sustainability manner, and also best of the practice of the animal farming. So I think on the perspective of the sustainability, and also the importance of promoting more healthy diet. I think those are the two things that we are expecting from the industry to make, of course, socialization or promotion with their products. Thank you.
And what do you think, Bu Umi? Maybe you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think what the industry can also contribute is actually to move to give more weighting to the food base. So like in the past, we think about food industry to do more about fortification to help improve nutritional status. But actually now more weighting can be given to promote the food sources itself. For example, like if we can utilize our resources in terms of animal source foods, which Pana has shown is actually available and produced locally into more food products, and it can also be done in collaboration with a small medium enterprise, for example, like for example, in some area, we also tested it in our studies in RECFON, how we can make a shredded fish, chicken liver, or anchovy into something which is delivering the nutrients which are in the problem nutrients. And actually, this can be done in collaboration with small, medium industry, even a big industry as a support for the local production of animal source foods. That's what I think should be the way forward. So more on the foods itself and less on the fortification, because evidence also shows that the animal source foods which are more bioavailable and will have a less negative effect in terms of nutritional status.
Okay, so I hope it's clear for our friends from the industry, or what can they actually contribute to this efforts. I think we can go to the next question. The next question also from Ibu Surmita to Panang. So her question is, animal source foods is relatively more expensive than plant-based source food, right, Pak? So is there any specific strategy from the government so the animal source food can be more available for all level of community?
Well, thank you, Grace. Well, actually, I can share with you that from the government perspective, we learned that we need to have any kind source of food on the basis of our biodiversity, on the basis of our capacity, on the basis of our natural resource, what we have. So you can see that from my presentation that the composition of the animal source food at this moment in Indonesia is dominated by fish and fishery products. I think the expansion of the making special administration, special ministry for the marine and fisheries, it is one thing that we are giving attention how we are developing enabling environment to make these fish and fisheries products become not only as a part of the sustainability of our resources, but also giving a good, much better quality of food for our people. So I think this is one of the strategy from the government. You can see that through this ministry, we are also allocating budget, not only to improve the capacity for the fishermen, but also improve the value chain, especially on the cold chain system for these fish and fishery products to maintain their quality. And we are hoping at the end of this intervention, we could have more better quality and more affordable fish for the people. I think those are the major strategy from the government. On another part of the animal source food that's coming out from meat, we can the government choose to improve the situation or the enabling environment for the industry of our poultry industry. So you can also see that the increasing or the portion from our poultry and egg that having a great demand from our people to this as I think is important, and we will as a government we will increase this portion and also the intervention to make the situation much better. And regarding for the beef and others, now the government putting the strategy of developing a much better breeding and breed situation. So I think for those three intervention, we are hoping that the condition of let's say animal food still expensive. We are hoping that we could also providing for the more affordable food for the people and more healthier as well.
Yeah, thank you, Panang. So it's a good thing to realize that meat doesn't have to be always beef. And what the government of Indonesia do is actually provide more alternative for meat, yeah, especially fish, which is locally available actually, and to fulfill the need for proteins, for animal source food proteins. And yeah, I hope that's answering the questions. And can we go to, oh, so the next question actually come from Ibu Judy, Judy Suti February. She's also a staff in CMU Rekpon. So her question is actually to all speakers. Her question is actually interesting because she's asking how among adolescents, we know that how the intake of animal proteins among adolescents can be improved. So because there's also data that intake of good quality protein source among adolescents is if suboptimal. So and adolescent is a special population, of course, it's becoming our interest because a lot of, like, for example, adolescent girls, they don't really like to eat meat because they're afraid of getting obese, or because of the lifestyle, the new lifestyles, they try to avoid meat in their diet. So what is your recommendation for this kind of situations? So maybe I will give the floor for Barbara first, for Dr. Hessler. So in terms of improving the animal source food intake for the adolescents, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so if you assume that animal source food intake is desirable for this particular population group because there aren't any suitable alternatives, then I would say one of the first steps is probably to understand what is the situation, what are the reasons for not consuming, and what would need to be done to encourage these population groups to start consuming animal source foods. Obviously, if they have very strong reasons not to consume animal source foods, as we see in many younger populations around the globe, which are now going with this trend of consuming fewer and fewer animal source foods, then they will most likely not change their minds because they are believing in a cause, they are believing in planetary health. They do not want to consume these foods for good reasons, and so I guess trying to convince them to do otherwise could be very, very difficult. And it may be more advisable to think about what can be alternatives and how can these alternatives be made acceptable to them, palatable to them. How can they have balanced diets without the animal source foods if they do not want to consume them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so we have to look at the different sides actually. So, Ibu Umi, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think indeed our findings shows that there is a need to improve the intake of iron, folate, and also a good quality protein in adolescents. And one way we can do it. Sorry. So one way we can do it is actually by promoting, using, optimizing the nutrition education in the school. At Senior Reform, we have Nutrition Goes to School, which also we have done some kind like a nutrition education in adolescent girls in every Friday session, for example, to teach them about what nutrient-dense food, a good quality protein, which can be consumed. At the same time, also we can also use the optimize the potential of school canteen, for example, to promote more consumption of good quality protein from animal source food, and even from the school garden, for example. So I think nutrition education is a key, and it is the adolescent is really a good timing for prevention of stunting. If you're talking about stunting.
Yeah, I think it's taking back more on the 18,000 or 70,000 days of life. Yeah. Yeah. How about Pak Anang? Do you have anything to add? Is there any specific program probably that targeted for adolescents?
Yeah, well, regarding for this inadequate for the iron-rich foods, which is, I think most of them are coming out from the red meat. I can share with you that in order to accelerate the self-sufficient situation for our country, for the beef provided for the people, we are having a program, we call it as a breeding acceleration. Since our beef is still not quite enough at this moment to give a good food or good iron-rich food for the people. This is and the second is regarding with the logistics. As Indonesia is archipelagic, I think logistics is quite significantly important, especially for the transportation on the beef sector. So I think on those two programs, first is breeding for our beef and all the red meat products, and also the logistic. I think those are the two programs that now we are where we are doing and working on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Anang. The next question, please. Oh, again, a question for Pak Anang, actually. So question is from Laras, Indria Laras, for Pak Anang. So with the optimal practice of many Indonesians on the consumption of fruit and vegetables, as well as animal source foods, I think this is somehow related to the previous question about what can industry do to increase animal source foods. Besides that industry, maybe Pak Anang, is there any other stakeholders that actually have an important roles in your strategy on how we can actually increase or promoting the animal source foods consumption?
Thank you, Grace. I think the role of local government is matters on this situation. Look, Indonesia is quite significantly experiencing of this, and what we call it as everything is becoming coming from the central government. But since 2000, within the reform era, we are trying to strengthen and empowering our local government. I think it is also the importance to improve the capacity for our local government, either on their practices, either on the regulatory framework, and also especially on their capacity of developing a food planning within the local government. I think in addition of inviting the industries to make an important role, the role of local government and also associated with the civil society or the community groups that they are quite having a significant great willing to make healthy diets and localizing all this food system. I think those are the two important that we would like to further seek in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak. I think now we go to the last question. I think the last question is for Dr. Hessler. Can we have the question on screen? So the question is quite long. It's from Dina from Indonesia. Just asking that in Indonesia, based on the data, the burden of foodborne disease from pathogenic microbes is basically, it's not the only problem that we have. We also have a big problem with the lead contaminations in our animal source food. So although we already try to reduce the lead concentration of fuel, but because we have this trade-off of also having to increase the access for animal source food, especially in the rural area, what do you think we should fix first? Is it should we fix the environmental risk factor first, or is it like first we have to increase the access? So what do you think, Dr. Hessler? Which one first?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult and great question. What first? I don't know the situation exactly in Indonesia and what is causing this environmental contamination with lead. So I'm not quite sure what is going on exactly, but I'm thinking if there is increasing environmental contamination with lead, then you're just adding to the problem continuously. And if that then stays in the environment for a prolonged time period and it goes into increased animal source food consumption or other increased food consumption, then exposure would, in my mind, increase over time. So I would probably say that ideally the contamination should be reduced, so that we do not have continuous intake through the food system. But I can also, I think your question in there is also that this contamination is part of the economic activities and part of economic development, which will benefit rural communities. And it would be very difficult to say to these communities, we need to slow down your economic growth a little bit because we need to fix the lead problem first. So where to go with that? I usually recommend with complex problems that people are asked what to do, the people who are most affected by these problems, that a participatory approach is chosen and communities are consulted, that the different possible pathways are discussed and thought through, and that people get to some consensus together and can advise on the way forward. So that would probably be my recommendation here as well, and to talk to the people who are most affected by these changes and ask them for their opinion.
I think that's a very excellent recommendations. Yeah. So with actually there is no one answer for all. It's just like we have to involve the community, and I'm basically asking what are their best possible solutions to handle that issues, right? So it's a very interesting one, and like because Pak Anang just highlight also the role of the local government. So it's actually probably as similar with the with Umi presentations on different area actually have a different nutrients needs, nutrients issues. Also, maybe different area has have a different environmental issues, and there is no one specific answer for all. There's no solution for all answers. So maybe the solution should come also from the local populations, the local community, and how we best can approach this question, the big question, yeah, whether we have to tackle we have to cure the mother nature first, or we have to cure the mothers with the babies first. Yeah. So it's something that I think is a very nice recommendation from Dr. Hassler, that again and again we have to look at the local situations and find the best possible solution, local solutions in that area. I think with that, I would like to thank all the speakers today. I think today we learned a lot. Starting from Bu Umi, we'll learn about that different area will have a different issues of nutrients, malnutrition actually, and different area will need a different approach in terms of providing animal source food alternatives. And also from Dr. Hassler, adding our knowledge about how complex is the food system. So saying that we need more animal for food source to help solving the problem of malnutrition among children or mothers, it's not really enough. We have to also see what kind of supporting food systems or issues around the food security and food safety and food access to really find the best possible solutions for each region. And I think from Pak Anang, we can also see a national strategy. Yeah, so even though local, each region will have their own local problems and solutions, but I think at the national level, the government has also provide some strategy that can facilitate the local government in order to solving their malnutrition problem and fulfilling their the animal source food needs that can help them solving the malnutrition issues, especially stunting and wasting. So with that, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers for today, and I give back the floor to Ciela.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grace. It's such a very interesting discussion. A great moderators, excellent speakers. Thank you very much once again, Pak Anang Nugroho, Dr. Hassler, Ibu Umi. Excellent presentations. I think that is a very worth of our time to spend it in today's international webinar. Once again, thank you. So, participants, ladies and gentlemen, before I close out the event today, I have several announcements to the participants. So, for the first announcement, I would like to inform all of the audience today that CMA Response will also have so many events, starting with tomorrow's event as the continuation of this event, partnership with Selang Hospital in East Lombok, tomorrow, 26 January. We will have another sessions with Ibu Umi, I think, yeah. And then also there will be Prof. Paul and the other speakers, pendekatan anak secara utuh dalam penanggulangan stunting. So the topic will be on about stunting, so don't miss it. And then also another event. Oh, this is a jingle and logo design contest. And for this event, also other events in details, please visit Semeo Rekfon social media. You can visit and follow at Semeo Rekfon. See you on social media. And another event on February, there will be a launching on policy brief about linear programming. integrasi panduan gizi seimbang berbasis pangan lokal terhadap kebijakan kesehatan dan sistem pangan Indonesia. So it's about the nutrition, balanced nutrition guidelines with locally available food base and the policy brief on it. Another event on February, there will be also the celebration of the 10th anniversary of Grace. And there will also be the Nutrition Go-To Workplace Seminar. So you can also visit our website, social media for more information. Don't forget to follow, subscribe this channel, Grace YouTube channel. Mark your calendar on these other fruitful events. Another information about the certificate. So to all the participants, the webinar material and e-certificate will be available maximally 3 weeks after the submission of your evaluation form. So kindly use the link provided after the evaluation form for later access, and stay tuned on social media, Instagram for the further updates. So don't forget to fill the evaluation form. You can now see the link of the evaluation form. Finish it, submit it, and also don't forget to save the link provided after you submit the evaluation form. Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of this international webinar. But I will wait a little bit longer, maybe. Okay. So don't forget to mark that link, okay? Save, mark, submit. I think you all already done it. Thank you very much. So this is the end of our event, the international webinar. Allow me to thank Grace once again for conducting this fruitful webinar series, and all of our honorable research persons, as well as the distinguished participants for your kind attention today. That was my pleasure to be the master of ceremony for today's webinar. I apologize to any of my words that less pleasing to all the audience today. Let us be guided by all of the things that we have learned and heard throughout our today's session. We hope to see you again in the next session. So I'm Sela Septiani. Thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
It's time to open our eyes to a bright and promising future. We'll rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn through science, health and technology. We will share our expertise. By promoting knowledge and policies, we can build a better world. Let us take a stand for our visions alone, bringing futures for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and dreams. Building the future is our legacy. We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities.